Zanele walked through the muddy paths of Ntonga, her clothes damp and sticking to her skin. It was late, too late she knew. But her sewing lessons had run long, and she didn't want to leave without finishing the dress she'd been working on for weeks. She clutched her bag tightly and hurried toward the small house she shared with her mother and stepfather. The sky was dark and rain had started to fall harder, soaking her hair and shoes. As soon as she stepped inside, the warm air hit her. But so did her stepfather's voice. "You think you can come and go as you please?" he bellowed, standing in the middle of the room like a storm waiting to explode. Before Zanele could speak, before she could explain, he grabbed her by the arm and pulled her back toward the door. "Please wait," she cried, but he didn't listen. He shoved her outside into the cold rain, slamming the door behind her. She stood there, shocked, her bare feet sinking into the wet ground, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. No coat, no shoes, no voice to defend her. She turned back, hoping her mother would open the door. She could see her through the window, standing still, her eyes lowered, her mouth shut. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't stop him. That silence cut deeper than the rain ever could. It was the night Zanele realized she wasn't just unwanted. She was alone. The rain poured down like it would never stop. Zanele's clothes clung to her skin, heavy with water. Her teeth chattered as she walked through the village, barefoot and shaking. She had nowhere to go, but still she tried. She knocked on one neighbor's door. No answer. She knocked again, harder. A curtain moved, then silence. She tried the next house. Someone peeked out, then quickly shut the window. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely there. "I just need a place to stay tonight." At one house, an old woman opened the door a crack, then looked her up and down. "You're that cursed girl," she muttered, and the door slammed shut. Zanele stood there for a moment, the words cutting through her like ice. Cursed. That's what people thought of her, like she was bad luck, like something was wrong with her just for being born. She had done nothing wrong. Nothing but come home late after trying to learn something good. And now no one would take her in. Her legs were too tired to carry her anymore. So she wandered to the main street and found a small closed shop. Its wooden awning gave her the tiniest bit of shelter. She sat down, hugging her knees to her chest, trying to stay warm, but it was no use. The cold crept into her bones. She was soaked inside and out. The rain kept falling, mixing with her tears until she couldn't tell the difference. She cried quietly, trying not to make a sound, but the pain in her chest was too big to hold in. It felt like the world had pushed her out and locked every door behind her. No home. No warm blanket. No voice saying, "Come inside." Just the cold, the dark, and the storm. She was 16. Just a girl. But that night, sitting alone in the rain, she felt forgotten by everyone. Like she didn't matter. Like she didn't exist. And still somehow she kept breathing. The sky was just starting to turn light when Zanele opened her eyes. Her body ached from sleeping on the cold, hard ground. Her dress was still wet, her lips dry, and her stomach empty. She hadn't eaten since the morning before, and her hands were so cold she could barely move her fingers. People began to pass by, starting their day, but no one looked at her. Just a wet, dirty girl curled up outside a shop. Then someone did stop. It was a woman, round, warm-looking, with a bright yellow headscarf and flower on her apron. She looked at Zanele with soft, kind eyes. "Child," she said gently, kneeling beside her. "You're freezing." Zanele tried to speak, but no words came out. Her throat was too dry, her heart too heavy. The woman didn't wait. She reached into her basket and handed Zanele a thick piece of bread, still warm from the oven. Then a small cup of sweet tea. The heat in her hands almost made Zanele cry again. But this time it wasn't from sadness. It was something else, something like hope. The woman sat beside her, not saying much at first, just letting her eat and sip. Then she spoke again, softly, like a mother would. "My name is Mama Fifi. What's yours?" "Zanele," she whispered. Mama Fifi nodded, as if the name meant something special. "Zanele, would you like to come with me? You don't have to stay out here in the rain." Zanele looked at her, unsure. She didn't trust easily anymore. But there was something in Mama Fifi's voice. Something that didn't ask for anything, didn't judge, didn't question. Just kindness. She nodded. Mama Fifi helped her up, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Let's get you warm," she said. And then we'll talk. That morning, for the first time in a long time, Zanele felt safe. Not just because of the bread or the tea, but because someone saw her, really saw her, and didn't turn away. She didn't know it yet, but this stranger had just changed her life. Life with Mama Fifi was nothing like the life Zanele had known before. The little room behind the bakery was small, but it was warm, safe, and hers. No shouting. No fear. Just the smell of fresh bread in the mornings and the sound of kindness in someone's voice. Mama Fifi didn't ask too many questions. She simply said, "You are here now. That's what matters." She gave Zanele clean clothes, hot meals, and something even more precious, a chance to start again. One day, Mama Fifi noticed Zanele carefully mending a tear in her old dress. Her hands were steady, her stitches small and neat. "Where did you learn to sew like that?" she asked. Zanele looked up shyly. "I was learning before everything happened." Mama Fifi smiled wide. "Then you must keep going." And so she helped Zanele find fabric scraps, thread, and a second-hand sewing machine. Every afternoon after helping in the bakery, Zanele sat by the window and sewed. Little things at first. Pillow covers, aprons, skirts. Slowly, her confidence came back, one stitch at a time. By the time she turned 18, word had spread. People from nearby towns came asking for her work. A bride wanted a dress that felt like a dream. Zanele listened to her story, smiled gently, and then created something soft and stunning, just like the girl who wore it. Each dress she made carried a little bit of her journey, the quiet strength, the pain she'd survived, and the love she'd learned to give again. She didn't talk much, but her work spoke loud. Every button, every fold, every piece of fabric told the world, "I'm still here." Kumalo town brides began requesting her by name. Not because she was famous, not yet, but because her dresses felt like hope. They felt like someone had poured love and care into every thread. Zanele didn't have a big shop or fancy signs. Just a tiny room, a sewing machine, and a heart that refused to break. She had stitched herself back together. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Zanele never forgot what it felt like to be cold, hungry, and unwanted. Even as her sewing business grew, that memory stayed with her. Not as a weight, but as fuel. She didn't want to just make dresses. She wanted to make a difference. One evening, after finishing a wedding gown, she looked at the raindrops sliding down the window. She thought of that night when she was thrown out into the storm. And then, like lightning, the name came to her. RainDaughter Designs. A name for girls like her, girls who had survived storms and grown anyway. At first, it was just Zanele working from a small backroom. But soon more orders came in than she could handle alone. Instead of hiring trained workers, she did something different. She found girls like she once was, orphans, runaways, those abandoned by their families. Girls who had nowhere else to go. She didn't just give them a job. She gave them shelter, hot meals, and clean beds. She taught them how to hold a needle, how to measure fabric, how to sew with care. But more than that, she taught them how to believe in themselves again. The workshop buzzed with laughter, music, and the soft hum of sewing machines. 10 girls filled the space with new life. Each one came in scared and unsure, and slowly they began to shine. Zanele was patient with them, just like Mama Fifi had been with her. Every dress they made carried a story, not just of beauty but of healing. Customers would say, "There's something special in your designs." And there was. Love, resilience, second chances. Zanele worked side by side with her team, never acting like a boss. She called them her sisters. And they called her something too, Mama Z, because to them she was more than a designer. She was a light in the dark. From one dress she had built a home. From thread to thread she had risen. And now she was lifting others with her. Zanele never dreamed she'd be on TV. She was used to quiet rooms, steady sewing, and warm laughter in her workshop. But one day, a customer who loved her work told her about a national fashion competition. "You have to enter," they said. "The world needs to see what you can do." Zanele wasn't sure. She didn't care about fame. But then she looked around at the 10 girls working beside her. Girls who had been broken like she once was. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about them. About every girl who had been left behind. So she entered. She worked day and night, creating 5 new dresses inspired by the rain. The very thing that had once soaked her in sadness. But now she turned that pain into beauty. Each dress had flowing layers like falling water, Soft blues and silvers like stormy skies, and hand-stitched raindrop details. They were full of emotion, full of story, her story. The day of the competition came and the show aired across the country. The judges were silent as her models walked out in the rain-inspired gowns. Then one of them whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." The crowd clapped. Then they stood. A standing ovation. Afterward, the host called Zanele to the stage. She walked out slowly, hands shaking. She didn't have fancy words or a speech. Just her truth. "I was thrown out at 16, she said, her voice soft but clear. "But I turned my tears into thread. And I built something from the rain." The next day, her face was everywhere: newspapers, social media, the evening news. The headline read, "Thrown out at 16. Now a star of Ntonga." Messages poured in. People wanted to buy her designs. Others wanted to donate to her workshop. But the messages that meant the most were from girls who said, "You give me hope." Zanele didn't smile because she was famous. She smiled because people were finally hearing her story and believing in it. She had once been left outside in the rain. It was a quiet afternoon at the boutique. Zanele was helping one of the girls adjust a hem when someone knocked at the front gate. It was unusual. Most people came through the shop entrance. She wiped her hands, walked over, and opened the gate. Her heart stopped. Standing there, older now but still familiar, were her mother and stepfather. For a moment no one spoke. The air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. Her stepfather looked down at the ground, while her mother looked at Zanele with wide, nervous eyes. "We saw you on TV, her mother whispered, almost like she wasn't sure if she had the right to speak. "We need help." Zanele didn't move. The man who had dragged her into the rain was now standing outside her boutique, the very place she had built from pain. He looked thinner, his clothes worn. "Business is bad," he said. "We're struggling." He couldn't even meet her eyes. Zanele looked at her mother, searching for something: regret, love, anything. But her mother just stood there, clutching her purse, silent like she had been that night so long ago. "You threw me out," Zanele said quietly, her voice calm. "I was 16. Her stepfather shifted uncomfortably. "We made mistakes," he muttered. "But we're family." Family. That word hit hard. Where had family been when she cried in the rain? Where was it when she had nowhere to sleep? But still Zanele didn't shout. She didn't slam the gate. She stood tall, steady, the woman she had become. "I'll give you food," she said simply. "But not money." Her mother blinked, surprised. Her stepfather frowned. But Zanele stayed firm. "You don't get to come back just because I made it. I built this without you." There was silence. Awkward. Cold. But Zanele felt no guilt. She handed them 2 bags of groceries and then gently closed the gate. Inside, the sewing machines hummed, the girls laughed, and the life she had created went on. Zanele didn't need revenge. She had something stronger: peace. Zanele sat alone that evening, the 2 grocery bags gone from her hands, the gate now closed. Her mother and stepfather had walked away slowly, their figures shrinking into the distance. She watched them until they disappeared, then quietly returned to the workshop. The girls inside were busy sewing and laughing, unaware of what had just happened. Zanele didn't speak about it right away. She needed a moment to breathe. Later, when one of the younger girls asked, "Mama Z, are you okay?" Zanele smiled gently and nodded. "Yes, I'm okay." But inside she was still feeling the weight of it all. Not pain, not anger. Something different. Something like release. They had come to her asking for help after all those years. The same people who had made her feel worthless. Who had left her shivering in the rain. Now they stood outside her gate, eyes lowered, looking for kindness from the very girl they once abandoned. And she had listened. She didn't shout. She didn't throw their past mistakes in their faces. She simply offered them what she could: food. A small kindness. But she also drew the line. "No, you cannot stay," she had said, her voice steady. "I forgive you. But I built this without you." Those words weren't meant to hurt them. They were meant to free herself. Zanele knew that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing peace over bitterness. About rising above what tried to break her, without letting it back in. That night, she sat at her sewing table, running her fingers over a new piece of fabric. The storm from earlier was gone. The air was still. She thought of how far she had come. From the cold ground outside a shop to this warm, bright space filled with life and laughter. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need their approval. She had found her worth long ago, thread by thread, stitch by stitch. And now she walked with dignity. Strong. Soft. Unshaken. The night of the ceremony, Zanele stood backstage in a long, flowing dress stitched by the very girl she had trained. Her heart beat fast, not with fear but with disbelief. She had come so far, from the cold streets of Ntonga to this glowing stage in the capital city of Kumalo. Her name was called Zanele Mthembu, recipient of the Kumalo Women's Honor. She stepped into the light, the sound of applause washing over her like warm rain. Cameras flashed. People stood. She was the youngest woman to ever receive the award, and everyone knew her story. The girl who had once slept outside a closed shop, now a national inspiration. As she walked up to receive the medal, her eyes filled with tears. Not of sadness but pride. She held the medal in her hands, heavy with meaning, and looked out at the crowd. They handed her the microphone. She paused, took a breath, and spoke. "I was 16 when I was thrown out into the rain," she began, her voice soft but clear. "I had no shoes, no coat, and nowhere to go. I thought my life was over." The room fell silent. "But that rain didn't drown me. It grew me. And now I stand here not because I was saved, but because I kept going." She looked down at the medal again, then smiled. "To every girl thrown out into the rain," she said, "let your tears water your future. Don't let the storm break you. Let it build you." There were tears in the eyes of many in the room. People stood again, this time not just for the award, but for her words, her strength, her story. Later that night, Zanele returned to her workshop, still dressed in her gown. The girls waited up for her, cheering as she walked in. She held up the medal and they all rushed to hug her. "This is for us," she said, her voice full of joy. "All of us." Because Zanele knew this was never just her victory. It was a win for every girl who had been pushed aside, who had cried in the dark, but kept going anyway. It was triumph born from rain. Zanele's name is now known across the country. But to the girls in her schools, she's not a celebrity, she's hope. She now runs orphan sewing schools in 5 cities, each one filled with laughter, fabric, and second chances. These are places where broken hearts are mended with thread, where abandoned girls find not just skills but family. Each school is painted in soft colors and filled with warm lights. There are beds, hot meals, and rooms full of sewing machines. But more importantly, there are kind hands and listening ears, just like Mama Fifi once gave her. Zanele visits every school regularly. She walks through the halls, remembers where she came from, and reminds each girl, "You matter. You are not your past. You are your own beginning." She never went back to her old home. Not even once. She didn't need to. The home she built now is so much bigger, stronger, and warmer. Not just made of bricks but of love and purpose. And every time it rains, she still pauses and listens. Not with fear but with pride. Because she knows what the rain tried to take from her. And she knows what she gave back to the world instead. They once called her a cursed girl. Now they call her Mama Zanele. Leader. Builder. Healer. The girl the rain tried to drown now runs an empire of hope. And she's only just begun.